Hi there, welcome back to Mudwalkers. My name is Chris. If you haven't already checked out the Patreon link in the description down below, go ahead and check it out. It supports what I do. Follow me on YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, all the things. Like, share, subscribe, all the regular, social media, video platform things. Let's get into the video. Yes, I know that the channel is mainly about nudism, and here I am wearing clothes. It's weird. But this video is meant to be viewed by people more than just the naturist community. This is supposed to be a video that everyone who watches Zootopia can watch. So hopefully, if you like the movie Zootopia, this movie suits your fancy. Zootopia is a fun little story about a small town rabbit who moves to the big city to do big things. But on her way to the big, urban utopia of her dreams, Zootopia, along the way when she arrives there, she learns that her dream of becoming a police officer might not be as realistic as she thought. And she has to learn how to exist in this new city environment and even figure out if her career as a police officer is something that's going to be sustainable in the long term. And that's the big conflict of the story is, can Judy actually survive city life? But she's got loads of optimism, so she hops into the situation with both feet. Well, our main character, Judy, ends up working a missing persons case, and she wagers her entire police career on this case. So if she can't complete the case in 48 hours, then she loses her job, she goes home. But if she gets it, then she actually gets to stay on the police force. Don't ask me how that works. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. By the way, homework for this video, if you haven't already seen the movie Zootopia, go watch it. It's actually a really good movie. And even if you're not going to watch the whole movie, at least stop the video here and go type in Zootopia nudist scene on YouTube and watch at least this one scene so you have some context for what we're talking about. But she's working a missing persons case, wagered her entire career on it, and she ends up teaming up with a con man she met just before this, who is a Zootopia resident who is a wily fox con man named Nick. So Nick is the fox con man and Judy is the police officer Bunny. And so she goes back to him and she finds out that he actually is a witness to her missing person's last known location, and he knows where the guy was going. And she says, "Take me there." And he says, "I don't know if you really want to go to that place. It's not really a place for a cute little bunny." And she says, "Oh, I'm going." And that's where the scene opens. So we see Judy and Nick enter a dimly lit space with curtains, beads, tapestries, candles, incense. They approach the desk where they find a meditating yak named Yax. Judy hands him a picture of Emmett the otter, and Yax confirms that he knows Emmett. Turns out Emmett is a regular here at the Mystic Oasis. Yax doesn't think he can be any more help though, so he suggests that Judy speak with Emmett's yoga instructor inside the facility. He says, "I'd be happy to take you back." And he starts to walk out from behind the counter, and it takes a minute for Judy to look at him again, and when she does look, she's absolutely shocked. She spins around, covers her eyes, and says, "You are naked." Yax is unfazed. He just wiggles his hips and tells her this place is a naturalist club. Zootopia has several catchphrases that they use throughout the film, and this is one of those times where one of those catchphrases pops up. We zoom in on Nick and Judy. Judy's staring at the wall, still trying to process what's happening right now, and Nick is delighted that she's uncomfortable. He just wants her to tell him he's free to go, so he didn't tell her where they were going. Nick tells Judy, in Zootopia, anyone can be anything. And these guys? They be naked. At this point, Yax throws open the double doors and says that the yoga instructor Nangi is just on the other side of the pleasure pool. We get a close-up shot of Judy, zooming in real close to get her stunned expression here as she takes this all in. Then we get the pleasure pool itself, where lots of different kinds of animals are just hanging out and having fun. Judy is understandably shocked. Then we see these hippos, then these bears, then these pigs. Judy is still stunned, not sure what to do or what to think. Nick leans in and lets her know there's no shame in cutting the case off right here and heading home, not realizing Judy has wagered her entire law enforcement career on the success of this case. So he says there's no shame in quitting, and she says yes, there is, and she charges inside. Then we get this shot of hippos playing volleyball with giraffes, which is just great. Volleyball is definitely a staple of naturist resorts, so this really hits the spot for us, I think. Then as Judy continues to look around with various expressions of shock, We get this shot of a panther licking her leg on a comfy couch, as well as ungulates casually strolling away from the camera. At some point during this stroll through the club, Yax is heard saying, "Yeah, some people think the naturalist life is weird, but you know what I think is weird? Clothes on animals." I also happen to think he bears a striking resemblance to a certain someone. Couldn't help but notice that this time around. Judy looks up in a way, shocked again at what she sees there, which is the rump of a giraffe leaning down to drink from a fountain. Then Yax, Judy, and Nick finally arrive at Nangi's yoga class. Yax turns around and tells Judy, as you can see, Nangi is an elephant, so she'll totally remember everything. Then Yax lets Nangi know that Judy is here with some questions about Emmett the otter. But despite Yax's assurances of Nangi's elephantine memory, Nangi has no idea who Yax is talking about. Yax then sets about reminding Nangi who Emmett is and what happened the last time he was at the Mystic Oasis Naturalist Club. So during the various poses that Nangi undergoes, Yax keeps describing Emmett to Nangi in exquisite detail and checking to see if she remembers now. And he says, "Remember that, Nangi?" And she just keeps saying, "No." Judy gradually realizes that Yax is the one with the good information here, so she starts taking notes on what he says. He mentions that Emmett was picked up by a really fancy car, and since he's describing everything in such detail, Judy thinks it's a good bet he remembers the license plate number, which he does. He gives it to Judy, and she dutifully writes it down. She has her next task laid out for her now, and Yax was happy to help. Yax just turns around and says, "I told you Nangi has a mind like a steel trap. I wish I had a memory like an elephant." End of scene. So when I first saw this scene a few years ago when the movie first came out, I had my knee-jerk reaction to it, and then I actually watched the movie a few more times more recently to prepare for making this video, and I realized that I actually had the wrong idea about this scene to begin with. So let me give you my first impressions, then we'll talk about my interpretation of this scene from 2024. So overall, I appreciated, I'm just gonna turn into 2018 me for a second, okay, and just speak in the present tense. So I appreciate that they included this scene. They decided to represent naturists, but they didn't even get the word naturist right. Disney, that's a 10-second Google search. You could have just figured that out a few minutes before the actors even did this scene. So that would have been a really quick thing to fix, and they didn't fix it. Like we said, Yax actually calls the place a naturalist club. A naturalist is a student of natural history, not someone who likes to take his pants off with other people. So it wasn't great. And you could be a naturist and a naturalist. You could be a naturalist and a naturist. You could be one or the other without being both, but they're not the same thing. So my thought at the time when I first saw the scene was, Disney, do better. Then there's the pleasure pool, which just reeked of innuendo to me, I guess I'll say. You get this first shot of the pleasure pool itself, and we have this sexy gazelle on the left, the symbolic imagery of the waterfall, you know, open and, you know, pouring out, and the elephant squirting out of his upright trunk. It really rubbed me the wrong way on the first viewing. It seemed like really bad misrepresentation. Then we get these shots of beach ball, mud baths, and back scratching. Now, the hippos playing with the beach ball is actually pretty good. I thought that was good representation even back in 2018. But the other two, the mud baths and the back scratching, those seemed problematic to me at the time because the insinuation there seems to be that naturists are acting like animals, that we're just dirty or gross or something, and I didn't appreciate that. Then we see the bent over giraffe and the panther and the volleyball. So the bent over giraffe we'll deal with first. Again, it just kind of leans into the whole, this is really gross, isn't it? Hee 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 kind of energy, which I didn't like. The volleyball was perfect because volleyball is a huge part of naturist culture. If you're not a naturist, just know naturists love volleyball. But the one of the panther having her leg up in the air and, you know, cradling it and just going with her eyes closed, just felt inappropriate to me, and I didn't appreciate that addition to the scene. And then we have the yoga. Oh my goodness, the yoga drove me up a wall the first time I saw the movie because they make the elephant's genitals the focal point of the scene. You know, the non-existent flat censored genitals that aren't really there visually, but they're there in your mind. Those genitals. And it's just not what naturism is. We don't focus on those things. We just don't want to wear clothes and we want to hang out and have fun. So that I felt like was extremely bad misrepresentation because it's just not the focal point of what we do. We just want to play volleyball and have fun. The yoga poses struck me as degrading and even maybe a little bit sexual, which I thought wasn't the right direction for the scene at all, and I really didn't appreciate it. So to sum it all up, my initial impression of the scene was that I really did appreciate that Disney was bringing naturism to the public eye, but I thought it was really bad misrepresentation, and it was barely redeemable as a scene. It was really terrible misrepresentation, but it was barely redeemable because at least they were representing naturism at all. So I would have given, at the time, I think I would have given the scene like a 2 or 3 out of 10. But like I said, my thinking on this scene has actually evolved quite a bit recently because I've been looking at it more deeply, been doing some deeper analysis. I think the scene has a much better message and a much deeper meaning than I ever gave it credit for, and I think it's actually much better representation of the naturist community than I ever thought before. But before we do that, I would like to thank my generous supporters over on Patreon. These guys are making the channel possible. They're keeping my work sustainable. Guys, I cannot thank you enough for everything that you're doing on Patreon. This background you see before you, the equipment that I'm using, a lot of it came from Patreon. So again, thank you so much. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon member, you can check out the link that will soon be right here, if it isn't already. There's also a link to that in the description down below, along with my link tree. We have really affordable options over on Patreon, starting with $5, $10, and up. The $10 option and above all get access to a monthly video call with me and the other patrons of those tiers. And it's a great time for us to get together and swap stories and share ideas and just in general hang out and have fun. It's one of the highlights of my month, getting to talk to you guys on our video calls. We had a special guest this past month, which was super exciting for me and the other patrons. Hopefully we'll be able to get some more special guests moving into the future, as well as interviews and things. And thanks to Patreon, I get to travel this year and visit some different resorts, hopefully. I have the funds for that. We'll find out if it's actually feasible and if the resorts will, agree to do some tour videos and things. But at this point, I'm rambling, so let's get back into the video. So, like I said, I've been doing some analysis on this scene more recently, watching it over and over and over again and poring over every shot in the entire scene, trying to understand it at a deeper level. And I think I understand it at a level at this point where I can only improve it by actually interviewing the animators and writers themselves, which I'm not interested in attempting. But But this analysis has changed my view of the scene, and let's take a look. Yes, Yax does say naturalist, but I mean, it is a kid's movie. Maybe Disney didn't want something that was going to be so child Googleable, that would be so easy to get nude results with. And I kind of get that, because naturalist and naturalism, these refer to naturalist is someone who is studying the natural world. Naturalism is either the study of the natural world or the belief that the natural world is the only world that exists, as opposed to there being like a spirit world or something. So I think I can kind of see maybe that could be part of the reasoning here. So I think it's reasonable, but I think it might be misguided. But I think there might have been a reason. So I have a little bit of an issue with it, but not a huge issue. Then we have Yax's reference to the pleasure pool, and upon reflection and watching the scene, I thought, well, sexual pleasure is not the only kind of pleasure. There are other kinds of pleasure. And given what I'm about to tell you about the rest of this scene, I think we can safely rule out the sexual interpretation of pleasure pool. Is the name still a little bit problematic? Yeah. Could it still mean the other thing? Maybe. But I don't think that it's as bad as I initially thought, at least. Let's start with the panther licking her leg. Now, I know this is taking the scene out of order, but bear with me. This is in the logical order of how my thinking evolved on the scene. Is it all started right here, because I was watching the scene, preparing for this video, and I remember pausing it right there and thinking, man, why? Why is this shot in the movie? Why did they do this? Why did they have this cat licking herself? Wait a minute. I thought, wait a second. She's a cat. This is what cats are supposed to do, right? Am I looking at this wrong? Am I overthinking the fact that there's a cat cleaning her fur with her tongue? Isn't that how cats are supposed to clean themselves? Is something wrong with me? Am I the problem here? Then I went back and pored over every single other shot in the scene with fresh eyes. And you know what I found? I found an elephant shooting water from his trunk. I found hippos splashing in water. I found bears scratching their backs on trees. And I found pigs cooling themselves off in the mud. You know what all these things have in common? This is exactly what these animals are supposed to do. This is exactly how they are supposed to live. If you have a problem with an elephant shooting water out of his trunk, then he isn't the problem, you are. If you have a problem with a cat licking her leg, she's not the problem. You are. We are. So I think that's the deeper meaning of this scene, is that naturism is like how we are just supposed to be. Because you hear it in the scene, Yax says, you know what I think is weird? Clothes on animals. You know what I think is weird? I think it's weird that people have to wear clothes all of the time. So if you have a problem with what the animals are doing in this scene, something isn't wrong with them. Something's wrong with you. Quick side note, look at these ungulates walking away from the camera. They're in the background of the shot of the panther, but they're significant. Look how normal they look. It's just a regular walking sort of pose, like they're just chit-chatting and just casually going on to the next activity of the day. This is what naturism is really like right here, this pose. People do just kind of like regular, normal, fun things at naturist resorts, and these two ungulates nail that energy. The posture here is just so casual and just relaxed. So Disney, great job animating this background, incredible attention to detail, top-notch stuff. Now let's look at the yoga. Let's be honest with ourselves here. The poses are hilarious, okay? The poses are just funny. I actually think that was the right direction to take the scene in. When textiles see this scene for the first time, it's going to make them uncomfortable. I'm sure a lot of them, maybe not all of them, but I'm sure a lot of them will be uncomfortable with this imagery, which is a good thing because it'll kind of like get them giggling. Making people a little bit uncomfortable helps them laugh. Helping them laugh helps them relax. Helping them relax helps them think through things with a fresh mind. So I think that humor here, coupled with a little bit of discomfort, you know, putting it right in the viewer's face, was actually the perfect thing to do for this scene. This scene needed some comic relief, coupled with some audience discomfort. And so I actually think that the yoga poses here are masterfully done. And it's not even just good movie making from a comedic standpoint, it's good movie making from an ideological standpoint, because I think that humor is a powerful tool in helping people think. And look at this. Look at her fat rolls. Disney didn't shy away from making Nangi look fat. The way that her fat rolls bunch up when she moves is perfect. Nangi doesn't have to be thin to be a naturist. Nobody does. She's perfectly happy being out here having fun with her friends without her clothes on. No one gives her a hard time. She doesn't give anybody else a hard time. She's out here doing yoga because she wants to be, you know, something. She doesn't even say. Maybe she wants to be healthy, maybe she doesn't. Maybe yoga just feels good and it's fun. Who cares? Nangi's out here being herself and no one's giving her a hard time about it. And I think that captures the essence of naturism. That's exactly right. Disney captured that perfectly in the character of Nangi. Now let's look at Yax, Judy, and Nick, because these three characters have radically different approaches to the yoga poses. Judy, obviously, is having difficulty coping with this visual stimulus. You'll actually see her in the scene turning her face away, or even at one point, Judy's so adorable. At one point, she actually takes her little notebook and she puts it over her eyes, which is her little face shut. I love that. And Nick is, well, Nick just stares at everything with abandon. He doesn't care. He has no flips to give. He just doesn't care. Now, interestingly, Nick doesn't leer at Nangi's body. Notice the look on his face. Even though he's staring right exactly where you're not supposed to stare, he's not making any weird faces. He's just looking at it like, He's curious. Oh, I don't see that every day. Interesting. Yeah, He actually even makes like a kind of a gross face at one point when Nangi makes a particular pose. But something you won't see Nick doing in this scene, again, is leering at Nangi. He's not being flirtatious. He's not, you know, doing some kind of innuendo with his eyes. He's just looking. Is it rude? Yes. Should you do that in a naturist setting? No. But, I mean, is he bringing sexual tension to the situation? No. He's just looking. That's actually, again, kind of masterfully done, Disney. That's a really difficult balance to strike, and you struck it. But look at Yax. Watch how Yax interacts with Nangi throughout the yoga poses sequence. When her legs are spread, he looks up where her face is. When she bends over with her butt out, he actually bends over with her to put his face down on her level and look her in the eye. Then when she spreads her legs open up high, he's not even looking anymore. He's talking to Judy. Yax is showing us that it's possible to have normal interactions with other naturists, other naked people, even when their bodies are doing wacky things. He's showing us how to talk to naturists, which again is masterfully done. It is perfect. So, coming at this scene with fresh eyes, I actually think it's really good representation, and I think it has a much deeper meaning and a better message than I ever gave it credit for before. I think it's actually a really great scene. It is almost completely perfect. Do you understand how significant that is? The naturist community has a rough time getting represented at all in mainstream, film. But the fact that Disney would not only represent us, but represent us this well, guys, that is significant. And I hope that more movies will come out with content like this so that we can help people to see what naturism actually is. I had some misconceptions coming into the scene the first time around. And when I took the time to look past those misconceptions and really look at the scene more carefully, I actually found that it was much more beautiful and beneficial than I gave it credit for. The scene is more beautiful than I thought, it has a deeper meaning than I thought, and it is far more accurate than I thought. And I give Disney full marks for that. Like I said, the deeper meaning is this. These animals are living exactly the way that they are supposed to live. If you have a problem with it, the problem isn't with them, it is with you. They aren't the weird ones, Judy is. You know what I think is weird? Clothes on animals. So Judy's actually the weird one right there in the dialogue of the scene. The message here actually seems to be that given our evolutionary history, the naked people are not the weird ones. It is the people with clothes on that are the weird ones. Now for context, I'm not a proponent of Darwinian evolution. I don't think that we came from lower life forms, so to speak, but the movie does present a Darwinian picture of natural history, so I'm speaking of it in that context. So yeah, in conclusion, I would say that looking at the scene with new eyes, I would give it a 9 out of 10. The reason it isn't a 10 out of 10 is because of two little nitpicks. One of those is the fact that they shied away from the word naturist. Again, they said naturalist, which isn't really accurate, but I kind of understand. And the other one is pleasure pool, because even though it doesn't have to be innuendo, there are plenty of other things that they could have called the pleasure pool that they decided not to call the pleasure pool. I mean, they could have just called it the water hole or the oasis or the pool. So it gets 9 out of 10. Pretty close, but not quite there. Pretty close, but not quite a 10. I give it full marks other than those two little nitpicks. Like I said, if you haven't seen Zootopia, go give it a watch. It's a great movie. I really like it. I think you already know which scene is my favorite. But with that, that's it for this video. I will see you in the next one. Here on YouTube, the copyright rules are fairly simple. They're simpler than I gave them credit for when I first got into making YouTube content. The problem is that copyright holders can be extra anal with YouTube content creators. Even when we follow the rules, sometimes we'll get copyright strikes anyway. It takes a long time to get rid of those. And if they don't go our way, we could actually get in trouble, even if we follow all the rules. And so since I still have a warning on my channel that doesn't expire until May, I had to come up with a creative solution to make this video. The solution that I came up with was to hand draw all of the slides instead of showing the scene. So if you want to show your appreciation for me taking 4 days of my free time, little snippets of free time over the course of about 4 days to hand trace every single one of these slides by hand. The thumbnail actually was done half tracing and half drawing by eye. So if you could leave some love with a like, a comment, share the video, support me on Patreon. It was a lot of work to do, you know, and I know it's worth it, but it was just a lot. I had a lot of fun drawing them, and I love having these drawings around to show people now. It's a great little conversation starter. So either way, it was a good experience.